Hi there, and welcome to the Educators Corner podcast, the show that brings you conversations with educators from all over the world. Conversations where we stay curious for a little bit longer about the issues, challenges, and opportunities which we are facing in our schools and in our communities. Today, we're going to be talking with Jeroen van der Waal about the oceans, the planet, and ikigai. Jeroen van der Waal is a man on a mission. He is founder of the BlueBeat Group, OrcaNation, and the Reef company. Jeroen's just come from delivering a fantastic interactive keynote session with our students here at British School Muscat, and they could not stop asking him questions at the end of that session. So we've got a few more questions, Jeroen, from those students, which we're going to use as our quickfire round a bit later in the podcast. But Jeroen, fantastic to have you here in Muscat with us today. How are you doing? How's your week shaping up?
Very well, Kai, especially for it being a Sunday. It was a magnificent start of the week, and I always get charged with energy when I have the opportunity to spend time with students.
Well, it was incredible to see how in a short space of time you captivated the interest of our students, and I'm sure you're going to be doing the same with our listeners today. So we're going to start off, Jeroen. I mean, I've said you are a man on a mission, so perhaps you could share with us what is your mission and why is it important right now?
My purpose, Kai, on this planet is to save the ocean, the planet, and ourselves. And my specific mission with OrcaNation, our education division, is to connect with 8 billion people on the importance of the oceans. The solution for us to address the world's most pressing problems on this planet, namely climate change, social economic inequality, and the destruction of habitats with the loss of life and ecosystems, lays in the ocean.
So this is clearly a mission that you care deeply about. I guess my next question is, so what experience was it that's brought you to this mission?
I have been very fortunate, firstly, that I was raised by a mother who was a super duper teacher. Secondly, in my working career, I've had the opportunity to travel the planet, and I have done a lot of diving around the world during my professional career.
Okay, so was it this love of diving that brought you to this mission?
My Kickstarter happened most probably in the early 70s when Jacques Cousteau, a world-renowned ocean explorer, launched his television series aboard the Calypso, his expedition ship. And Jacques Cousteau was the inventor of scuba, which most people recognize as scuba diving.
So you were very much engaged in scuba diving from an early age. Was it that alone that brought you to this mission?
No, what brought me to this mission is that for the longest time, especially growing up as a young child, I felt odd and maybe not normal. I was thinking deeply and a lot about many things that I saw happening on the planet in the 70s. And I felt very complex and difficult about many things that were paining me that apparently were acceptable for adults. So I felt like I was the black duck. And I thought that I was just strange or not normal, being worried about all these things that I saw.
So how would you summarize your experience of school at that time?
I have mixed feelings about school. I love learning theory. I love reading books, listening to podcasts. I love non-fiction. I'm a deep thinker and learner. So automatically you would think that I would love school. My experience with school, especially primary and secondary school, was quite poor because the way I think is not necessarily in a straight line. And I use different thinking patterns and kaleidoscopes, I call it, to come to conclusions and to study situations. And the way we were educating children in the 70s, but I think today it's still very similar, is very much according to a fixed curriculum in a straight line.
So you had quite a troubled childhood, adolescence. You're not engaging particularly strongly in education, but you were thinking deeply about the world. You were reading about the world. You had this passion for scuba diving. And then I think as you went to university eventually, you did much better at university than you did at school. Can you tell us a little bit about your university experience?
Well, my most favorite current book is a book called Blue Ocean Strategy. It has nothing to do with the ocean per se, but the book is about the need of us thinking without boxes. So thinking out of the box is not enough. The box is still a limiting factor. And the thing that happened at university is that we were much more expected to study and learn by ourselves. There were many, many books that we needed to read, but I always loved reading books, and it was less prescripted. And what I discovered at university is that I was actually motivated by my professors to think without a box and to go very far and broad and deep in my thinking, which ultimately accumulated into my thesis, which led to a fantastic result. And it gave me a lot of confidence that I was not necessarily stupid as I thought in primary and secondary school, but I was just thinking in a different way.
Okay. And then that led to a very successful career in the oil and gas industry, which then culminated, I think, you were just telling our students in a presentation where you were talking to your board about a corporate social responsibility project. And this was going to be the future. This was going to be the next step for you. Can you just play back to the listeners about what actually happened at that presentation and how that led you to your next step?
Yes, I always have been a very, very competitive human being, Kai, both mentally and also physically with sports. I'm a team player and I love to build winning teams. My board asked me to design and develop a corporate social responsibility program, which we could use to publish in our shareholder report to drive our shareholder value. I was a co-investor and shareholder in this company. So I took about 6 months with my management team in Southeast Asia to develop a beautiful program where we would build a vocational training school to give young men and women from Southeast Asia the opportunity to learn our highly complex engineering skills to build wellhead control panels for the exploration of oil and gas underwater. When I presented my plan on which we worked for 6 months to my board in a board meeting in Amsterdam on Good Friday 2014, everybody applauded me on the audacity of the plan that I put forward. And then my president told me, it's a fantastic plan, but we are not going to do it. It's too expensive. It's too mid and long term. I just want you to do something quick and fast. Buy some football outfits for your employees. Let them play football on the company lawn with the logo pretty well visible. So we can print that and publish that in our shareholder report to drive shareholder value. This is the first time that I got connected with what we would call whitewashing or greenwashing. I did a fiery speech about ethics and core values and why I believe that our investment needed to be mid and long term to drive much more shareholder value. And 14 days later, I got fired by our president, who told me that our thinking was not aligned. And I was put on a 9-month garden leave. Yeah.
So for someone who's competitive, who cares deeply about the work they've been doing for more than 20 years, you had a very successful career. I think for someone to turn up when you think you've created a fantastic project for the company, for the local population, to be told that you've been fired from your job, that must have been a pretty tough moment.
That was one of the worst things that ever happened to me in my entire life. Like you said, I'm very competitive. I pick and choose my battles, but I don't lose them normally. I'm always over prepared. And I have every different scenario that can happen in my plans. So I can pull them from the drawer and make sure that I act accordingly. So when you are in your early 40s and you are a CEO and board member of a big industrial group worldwide, you are potentially on top of your game and on top of the world. I didn't see it coming. I would never have expected to get fired by anybody. I'm some sort of a German shepherd, a very loyal dog, and I normally don't change employers. So this was like a massive shock to my system, and I couldn't really deal with it properly. Yeah.
So how did you deal with it?
When life throws you lemons, you make lime juice, I learned. I'm very fortunate that I've been with my wife for a very long time, and we are yin and yang. And typically, when one of us is in a bad spot and the other one is in a good spot, we are capable to help each other. So my wife really helped me to reflect. She made me think even deeper. I was placed on 9 months garden leave. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't have a garden, lived in an apartment. So I was not allowed to work, but I got my salary for 9 months. And I used that time for a lot of self-reflection. Again, I turned limes into lime juice or lemon into lime juice. I was on a course which, funny enough, was funded by my ex-employer with INSEAD, the famous university from Paris. And that was a course about awareness, vision, inspiration, resilience, etc. for CEOs. And I was introduced to a professor who introduced me to the principles and concepts of ikigai. And until that time, I knew a lot about Japan. I'm a judo practitioner, but I had never heard of ikigai. And ikigai changed my life.
So from that 9-month period, so you went from perhaps the lowest point in your career, you discovered ikigai, and out of that period, I think, came the birth of the BlueBeat Group. So how did that happen during that period? What was the origin story of the BlueBeat Group?
My whole life, I was completely obsessed with knowledge and learning. Not necessarily in the traditional way as we discussed at school, but I think I was 6 when I was introduced by my mother to the public library, and we were allowed to take 7 books a week from the library in between different categories. So every Wednesday afternoon when the Dutch public schools were off, I would go to the public library and collect 7 books, maybe 2 cartoon books, a novel, an adventure book, and a book about oceanic history. And I would read all 7 books typically. And I didn't look at that as a chore or a task. It was an obsession to read them. And then I was introduced to the director, a lady of the library, who said, Jeroen, you are renting a lot of books every week. We have a book club where once a month you have to read 1 book, of which we will invite the author to the library. And then you young people can interview the author about his book and talk about that. So I read a lot of books my whole life and started to learn a lot about the planet, about the oceans, about science, about engineering, etc. And I got completely obsessed with all this knowledge. I fell in love with the oceans, with Jacques Cousteau, as we mentioned, and with other adventurers and explorers. And I wanted to become a human being that would almost be like a guardian of the oceans and the planet. So I fell in love with the oceans and the planet, and that is ultimately what made me build the BlueBeat Group, which is the blue heartbeat of the green planet. And without that blue heartbeat, there is no green planet. So the BlueBeat Group became my life's work, my holding company, under which I've established 4 pillars. And the original pillar is about igniting ocean love. The operating company is a company called OrcaNation, a fusion between orcas, education, motivation, inspiration, vacation, OrcaNation. And OrcaNation's mission is to connect with 8 billion people on the planet and make them fall in love with the oceans and educate them on how important the oceans are to address the world's most pressing problems, namely climate change, socio-economic inequality, and the destruction with the loss of lives and ecosystems that takes place at the moment. According to the United Nations, climate change and socio-economic inequality are the biggest threats for mankind currently on this planet.
So getting that understanding of the importance of the oceans, educating about the oceans, that's a really important part of your mission. And I know that you actually put that into practice. You believe a lot in experiential learning. You believe a lot in outdoor education. Why is experiential learning and getting students outside the classroom, why do you think that is more important than ever?
It is so important, Kai, in 2025, because we have an overload of sensory data, which is brought to us via televisions, via screens that you see everywhere you walk, our telephones, the internet, TikTok, you name it. And what worries me a lot at the moment is that there are four basic functional items that every human being on the planet requires. It's safe and clean drinking water, a safe place to live, safe and healthy food. If we start to connect it more and more with artificial intelligence, with digital data, without moving and without seeing real life as it unfolds, we start to almost live in a snow globe that will disconnect us, let's say, from environmental and biological reality on this planet. And I believe that we human beings need to stay truly human to counter AI. The only way, or the best way, I should say, for young and old to stay connected with the environment is not with screens, but is to go outside, to experience Mother Nature, to experience physical challenges and achievements that will help us to become stronger human beings.
So connecting with nature is very important. That's an important part of your mission. But I think what you also think is really important for young people is this idea of having a purpose and this whole notion of ikigai, which you came across in your nine-month period as you're moving from an oil and gas worker to becoming the founder of OrcaNation and BlueBeat Group. So can you tell us a little bit about ikigai? I mean, let's assume listeners out there don't know what ikigai is. What is ikigai?
Ikigai is a beautiful principle and concept that originally comes from Japan. And with ikigai, what you work on and what you believe and what you see is that you need to learn to combine and embrace the things that you really love, the things that you are really good at, with the things that other people like you to do or are willing to remunerate you for. I made the example of my upbringing, which in those days was very common, and I think today it is still very common with many children and their parents, is that human beings tend to copy behavior from their ancestors. People talk about progress, but in this case, there is little progress. Many times you see generational traits being passed on from one generation to the other. What I believe is that we should not separate the things that you love to do from the things that you are good at and the things that other people want to remunerate you for. If you can embrace your ikigai, you basically will sweet spot yourself and you will become a very, very satisfied and happy human being because your hobby turns into your work and it is like an endless, infinite movement that helps me to recharge my batteries every day. So basically, you combine your passion and your love with things that you are very good at.
So what you love, what you like, what other people will value or they'll pay you for, that creates, if you can get those three things overlapping, that then creates your sense of purpose. Yes. And you are able to do that. So just tell us a little bit about what you love and like, and how that's helped you shape your mission.
Yeah, so I love the oceans. I love nature in general. I love science and technology, history, exploration, adventure. All those things that I love to do, I find them in the oceans and in the jungle. I am good at system thinking, thinking without boxes, engineering, numbers, economics, physics, math, operations, research, statistics. So I like numbers. And I combine all of that in the BlueBeat Group into something that fulfills me with a lot of love and joy. My purpose of the BlueBeat Group is to save the ocean, the planet, and ourselves. And the BlueBeat Group became my instrument, my portal to basically do what I love to do and what I'm good at every day, helping me to drive my purpose, which is to save the ocean, planet, and ourselves. Building an organization that has 4 foundational pillars. Igniting Ocean Love, which is OrcaNation as an operating company. Rejuvenating Ocean Health, which is the Reef company, and Blue Oasis Technology as a gigantic engineered asset company that is going to sequester all excess carbon that mankind produces on the planet. Combining that with Unlocking Ocean Value, which is the Blue Box, which is the world's first underwater satellite network that we are building with the support of companies like IBM and Google. And then fourthly, propelling the ocean economy with our organization called Narwhal Ventures, which is an investment vehicle that will invest in young people that are developing services, technologies, and products for the betterment of the oceans.
So I think I'm still learning here. So I think I got that wrong a few minutes ago. Ikigai is combining what you love, what you're good at, and what people will pay you for.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but you are right. You are a good student.
I was reflecting on my learning there.
Yeah.
So you've talked about the importance of connecting young people with nature and getting out of this screen world and getting out into the ocean, up into the mountains, into the desert, connect with nature. That's important. Secondly, having a purpose, finding your ikigai, what you love, what you're good at, and what people would pay you for. Having that, create that sense of purpose, find that sense of purpose is really, really important as well. And I think you've also talked about how important it is to develop what you might call life skills beyond, if you like, what we might traditionally call academic learning, maybe resilience, confidence, flexibility, teamwork. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on the value of those skills beyond traditional academic learning.
When I visit beautiful schools around the world, most of them have fantastic facilities, incredible teachers that are extremely motivated and best in class, beautiful school uniforms, and the highest possible GCSE, A-level, and IB results. When I go to the outside world, where we talk about universities and Fortune 500 companies that are looking to hire people, it is almost like taking the snowman out of the snow globe and placing it in the desert. The curriculums that we are working with are between 40 to 70 years old. They have progressed, obviously, but I feel a big disconnect between what we need in 2025 in the real world as it is and what we are being taught in our snow globes, our super protected environments. What we are trying to do with OrcaNation is help educators, teachers, parents, and children to make real life connections between the very important core curriculums that children are being taught at school and the expectations and requirements that companies have for new employees, especially in the context and environment of artificial intelligence. I think it is so important that we learn to think without boxes and that we help our students to be battle-proof to join, working life.
My experience over a number of decades as an educator, that going outside, learning outdoors, whether it's in the oceans, up in the mountains, in the deserts. This is a wonderful way of developing those skills, and I think you're finding that in OrcaNation as well.
Yes, I to complete your question or my answer on your question, Guy. What we do is we show students and teachers how we can use the fundamentals of geography, biology, physics, and math, for example, in the outside world, and how we can make correlations between the theoretical curriculums and real life, including law, engineering, physics, science, etc., and apply that to solve the world's most pressing problems.
So you're doing some pretty audacious projects to try and save the ocean, and save the ocean so we can save our planet on ourselves. I think you're building, planning to build 5,000 reefs around the world, for example, and these are huge projects. And that might seem quite overwhelming for a 12-year-old student who's thinking, yes, I'm really concerned about the ocean and the planet and myself, but what can I do as a 12-year-old? So on a very practical level, think of a 12-year-old or a 13 or 14-year-old, what could a student do now, today, as a small step towards your mission?
It is always interesting, Kai, to have these kind of conversations with people like yourself. I find it super inspiring and intriguing. I'm an extreme optimist, and I learned somewhere that you have the 3 or 4 Fs. You have fighters, flighters, freezers, and fainters. And only 2% of the global population are fighters. And basically, my message to your students, and today we had 300 in your auditorium, is please don't look at limitations. Don't look at boxes or thinking out of the box, but forget the boxes. You have a clean and clear canvas to help the ocean, the planet, and ourselves to make a difference and to help us to slow down climate change, for example. It is a big, hairy, audacious goal. But my message to your students is find your ikigai as soon as you can. Embrace what you love to do and what you are good at. Start doing that today. Have some good conversations with your parents and your teachers about your future career choices, the subjects that you are going to choose for your A-levels or for your IB, and the university that you will select for your bachelor's and master's, etc., and look at how you can find your ikigai, your sweet spot, and work and solve the world's most pressing problems with the knowledge and the things that you love to do, the knowledge that you have and the things that you love to do. So in a practical way, don't look at limitations. Embrace what you love to do, and science and things that you can learn, and don't look at limitations. Just follow your heart from that perspective, and I'm convinced that you will become a very successful and happy person.
On a very practical day-to-day level, are there choices we can make? Are there little actions we can take which might help support the oceans as they are and make them a little bit better?
I wrote a book called Together We Can Turn Tides, a manifesto to save the ocean, planet, and ourselves. And in that book, I'm having 80 did you knows about the ocean that most adults don't even know of yet in 2025. And there we are sharing ocean facts. When you talk about practical support and things that everybody can do today, I love teaspoons of change. If we compound 0.5% improvement every day, it accumulates to a gigantic annual improvement on anything that we do, right? Many people are not aware that in most developed countries, we throw away 40% of our food every day because we want to have an excessive amount of offerings and we only consume 60% of what we have available. The rest we throw it away. What most people don't know is that a typical person car personal car, like a passenger car, is used about 4% of its useful time per 24 hours. In other words, 25 people technically could use one car. But in most in most developed countries, typical households have at least 2 cars per household, right? So when you start extrapolating these numbers to 8 billion people on the planet, this is when you get insights as to what we can do to save resources, how can we save energy, how can we have a totally different way of consumption and consuming. And yeah, I have numerous examples that people could learn from, right?
Okay. So thoughts are on food waste and car usage. I mean, we've been hearing a lot very recently about the amount of plastic that's in the ocean. Have you got any thoughts about small steps we can make to start to tackle that problem?
Yes. Plastic in the ocean, fortunately enough, became a very well-known topic thanks to a guy called Boyan Slet, who started the ocean cleanup. I was lucky enough to have met him a few times. And Boyan has identified for all of us how gigantic the challenge is of plastic in the ocean. What many people still don't realize is that a lot of the plastic that we have in the ocean starts in your living room. Ultimately, all plastic that is being disposed of irregularly and not thrown away properly will end up in rivers, in lakes, and in the ocean. So the oceans are like a gigantic collector of all this trash. What is really important for all of us, and I'm sure that all your students are already aware, is to dispose of this plastic properly, in your homes, on the school campus, etc., etc. Make sure that it doesn't end up in the environment, because ultimately it will end up in the ocean.
So we've got 5 questions from our students, and the rule of the Quickfire round, Jeroen, is 1 word, but no more than 1 sentence. So 1 word is absolutely fine, but no more than 1 sentence. That's why we call it the Quickfire round. So here we go, 5 questions. The first question, these are all BSM students, is from Brody. So Brody's question is, what is the deepest dive you've ever done, and where was that?
It was 57.8 meters. That's the deepest that you can go with normal air. And it was on the northeast coast of Bali.
Secondly, question from Joel. What's your favourite place to dive, Jeroen?
That would be Indonesia, 18,300 islands and a lot of dive opportunities.
Question 3 from Hassan. One day, do you think that human beings will be living in the ocean?
Absolutely. It's already starting.
We want to hear more about that. That might be another podcast episode. You talked a lot in your talk about satellites. That's part of your projects. I think that's part of the Unlocking Ocean Value section of BlueBeat Nation. Lots of questions about the satellites and underwater. I think every other question we had was about underwater satellites. So they're going to be, I think you think in the future, you're going to have thousands of underwater satellites. And one of the many questions we had about the satellites was, are they going to be powered by currents or motors? That's the first bit. So currents or motors. And if they're powered by motors, how are they going to cope with the rough terrain? So 1 word or 1 sentence to answer that question, Jeroen. That's for Verinder. Thank you, Verinder, for that question.
Ultimately, we will use tidal movements, to charge and discharge motors and energy that we require. We will use ocean movements and tidal movements in an as natural as possible way to make sure that our equipment will be ocean proof.
And our final question in this quickfire round comes from Noor. And Noor's question is, she's obviously very optimistic, Jeroen. Her question is, once you've restored the oceans to their natural state, what will your next mission be?
Noor is a futurist like I am. I don't meet many people that believe that I can deliver on our purpose to save the ocean, planet, and ourselves. I still have about half a century left to deliver on my mission. And I think once I've done that, I hope that I've given the reins to the next generations to continue protecting the ocean, planet, ourselves. And I might play a little bit more golf.
Okay. Well, we're going to bring it to an end there, Jeroen, but thank you so much for sharing with us today and with our students earlier today your mission to save the ocean, our planet, and ourselves. You clearly are a man on a mission. You're going around the world talking with young people. That's a key part of your work. So thank you for joining us today at British School Muscat. Thank you for coming on the Educators Podcast, Educators Corner podcast. And we wish you the best of luck with your mission. It is so important, and it's really important that you make a success of it.
Well, thank you very much, Sky, for the opportunity, and great pleasure to having met you, and good luck with your podcast.
You've been listening to the Educators Corner podcast, the show that brings you conversations with educators from all over the world, the podcast where we stay curious for just a little bit longer. The Educators Corner podcast is hosted by me, Kai Vasher, and produced by Stuart Pardo, Zoe Snell, and Marion James, and by BSM BSS Productions.